call her an author. She's an executive and a mother. And the mother and grandmother might be the most important role she has in life. Mother of 3, grandmother of 2. She served as president and CEO of UNICEF USA since 2007, and in that time she has truly dedicated her support to UNICEF's life-saving work of putting children first, and that is so evident in everything that organization has done during that period. Under her leadership, UNICEF USA has doubled its annual fundraising revenues, and that money is going to help children everywhere in the world. She's been named 21 of 25 women changing the world in 2017 by People magazine, 20 most influential moms of 2017 by Family Circle, 25 moms we love by Working Mother magazine, and 10 women to watch by Jewish Women International. But 2 things you don't know about Caryl, and I think you do need to know. The first is she does not drive a Bentley or a Rolls Royce. She drives a Toyota Prius. And more importantly, when we selected maternal and neonatal tetanus as our cause and thus UNICEF as our partner, she committed to me at that time that UNICEF would be the best darn partner we've ever had. And now, 8 years later, that is true. Caryl, you've been the best partner we've ever had. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Caryl Stern.
I watched the film before I get into my formal comments, and I found myself thinking about standing before you, some of you, almost 10 years ago, and it's remarkable. Really, it's remarkable. So, good afternoon, everyone. I don't even have words to tell you how honored I am to be invited to speak at this luncheon that's dedicated to the Eliminate Project. It is really, honestly, a privilege to be in the same room with all of you who have done so much and who keep doing so much to help keep families around the world protected against maternal and neonatal tetanus. Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you for your passion and for your continued support of the Eliminate Project. 9 years ago, UNICEF USA was one of 200 organizations that fought to be chosen as your partner because we knew, perhaps better than most, the amazing potential of Kiwanis. We know that Kiwanis members not only have a heart to save, but that Kiwanis also has a mission that most closely aligns with the mission of UNICEF, to serve the children of the world. And I personally fought, and some of you in this room know this, because of my own personal connections to this organization. My late dad was a proud Kiwanian, and I joined the team that flew out to present to your leadership, and as corny as it sounds, told my mom on the phone that night that I could just feel my dad's smile when I pitched a new program to Kiwanis. And as the president and CEO of UNICEF USA, I am truly grateful for the opportunity to be here and just say my sincere thanks to all of you for the choice you made to be our partner and for your tireless work to save and protect vulnerable women, babies, and families from MNT, a truly terrible but completely preventable disease. As most of you already know, we at UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, we're mandated by the UN to advocate for the protection of children's rights, to help meet their basic needs, to expand every child's opportunity to reach his or her full potential. UNICEF was originally founded in 1946 to meet the emergency needs of kids and child refugees in the aftermath of World War II, which is particularly poignant as I stand here 9 days after June 20th, recognized as World Refugee Day. And for over 70 years in 190 countries and territories, UNICEF has done whatever it takes to help a child survive and to thrive. And today, as we're gathered here to discuss some of the most pressing global issues, there is none more staggering to me than the over 50 million children on the move, 29 million of which have been forcibly removed from their homes, all of whom have been taken away from friends and family in an attempt to escape violent circumstances, extreme poverty, hunger, and brutal conflict. 50 million kids tonight sleeping on rocks instead of being tucked into beds. That translates into 1 of every 45 children in the world who is currently on the move. Young people being forced to make difficult, life-threatening journeys every day just to have a chance at a better, brighter, and safer future. As a mom, it is impossible to me to comprehend the extent of the horrors that parents face that lead them to the decision to send their child away on a journey to the unknown. And yet these scared, hungry, confused kids are treated as just another number, by most of the world. They're treated as a statistic, but they are not statistics. No matter what we label them, migrants, refugees, displaced, illegal, legal, we must remember that they are children first. And in this pivotal moment in history, we are facing the worst humanitarian crisis since UNICEF was founded in the aftermath of World War II. This cause, this global cause, is one that sits very close to my heart because I am the child of a child refugee. In fact, that experience stays with me in absolutely everything that I do. I have a picture. It's a picture of a 6-year-old little girl, and she's standing on a dock holding the hand of her 4-year-old brother as they're getting ready to board a ship bound for a country that neither of them knows, that speaks a language neither of them speak, and to which they are traveling with neither their mom nor their dad, but instead with a woman whose last name they know, but whose first name they will never know, because once they arrive in their new country, they will never see her again. The year is 1939. The little girl in the picture is my mom, the little boy, her brother, my uncle, and they're bound for America because the Nazis have invaded Vienna. And as Jews, the only way their parents can save their lives is to make that heart-wrenching decision to send them away to an orphanage on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, hoping, praying that the separation will not be for too long. I heard that story from the time I was old enough to listen. My mom repeatedly emphasizing the woman who brought them to the United States, deposited them into an orphanage. Not the horrors that forced them to leave, but the woman. Teaching us, my brother, myself, anyone who would listen, that one person really can indeed make a difference. And when I first heard my mom's story, perhaps I was 4, 5, or 6, I don't really remember the exact moment, but I do remember asking her, where was the world? Why didn't anyone stop this? How could anyone let this happen to children? And she offered that many people at the time claimed they didn't know it was happening. Well, today, we do know. Thanks to television, the internet, newspapers, we are all well aware, and it is our duty to do something about it. Because as my mom's story, as my story proves, it only takes one person to make the difference to save generations. And as I look around this room this afternoon, I see a room full of one persons. People who not only individually strive to improve the world for children, but who are part of an organization whose traditions and global partnership with UNICEF drive commitments to save and protect vulnerable children across the world. And it is your commitment as Kiwanians to save and protect vulnerable moms and babies, those at risk of tetanus, that brings me here today. There has been tremendous progress for children since the time we last gathered together in Las Vegas for the Eliminate Project. You know, you say what plays in Vegas stays in Vegas. This is one I'm proud to share with the world. And yet this progress is endangered due to inequities, humanitarian crises, a lack of timely funding. Between 1990 and 2016, the number of children under 5 dying every year fell from 12.7 million to 5.6 million. That's the number dying of causes we already know how to prevent. This means the number of children under the age of 5 who die each day from preventable causes has fallen from 34,000 each day to 15,000. This number has been more than halved, all while the world's population has grown by 2 billion. Since 1999, UNICEF and our partners, including Kiwanis International, have vaccinated 151 million women against tetanus, protecting them and their future children from this excruciating disease. Maternal and neonatal tetanus has been eliminated, as you heard, in 45 of 59 high-priority countries. We know how to reach children with what they need. Positive momentum is there, and your partnership continues to contribute to this progress. MNT is a disease born of poverty. Tetanus is a natural occurring bacteria. It's present in the soil everywhere. And despite the fact that the world has had a vaccine against tetanus for more than a century, more than 80% of all tetanus cases strike moms and newborns at what should be the most joyous moments in a mother's life, the moment she gives birth. Maternal and neonatal tetanus remain a threat to women and newborns in 14 countries. This disease, contracted through unsafe and unclean birthing practices, leads to excruciating pain and fatality for babies. Where you find this disease, you find the most vulnerable. Those who live days away from the nearest healthcare clinic, who have to climb mountains and cross deserts to give birth, those without access to skilled birth attendants, those in extreme poverty, and those who are afraid to go outside due to conflict and instability. You can see that millions of children still lack access to simple and affordable vaccines to protect them from diseases like measles, polio, and tetanus. Let me give you an example of the conditions that put women at risk and why I feel such a sense of urgency about the need for funding for the Eliminate Project. Yemen. Yemen is one of the chronically underdeveloped countries facing one of the world's largest, most complex humanitarian crises today. Almost the entire country, 22.2 million people, needs humanitarian assistance. Conflict has caused the internal displacement of 2 million people, left 1 million public sector workers without pay for a year, and undermined access to ports, to airports, obstructing getting essential humanitarian and commercial deliveries into the country. And the recent outbreaks of diarrhea and cholera, symptoms of collapsing public systems, has now reached almost over 1 million cases. On top of this, the diphtheria outbreak in 2018 has now reached 1,200 cases in Yemen. In addition, 16 million people there lack access to safe water. Children are the primary victims of this conflict. Victims, more than 1,100 were verified as killed or maimed in last year alone. 394,000 kids under 5 currently suffer from severe acute malnutrition. The damage and the closure of schools and health facilities threaten children's access to the basics of education and health services, not just today, but for years to come. UNICEF has carried out programs for vulnerable Yemeni children for more than 40 years, and we will continue to steadfastly work to save and protect kids affected by the current conflict. And UNICEF can do this because of its unique advantage, our unique advantage, of being able to negotiate directly with governments, and in the case of conflict, all parties, to negotiate access to women, children, and families to provide life-saving care. Just recently, UNICEF carried out Yemen's first ever cholera vaccination campaign, immunizing more than 270,000 against this life-threatening disease. The fact that UNICEF is viewed and known as a trusted and neutral agency that only cares about the well-being of kids enables UNICEF to conduct vaccination campaigns and related programming even in the middle of a conflict. But the other critical factor that enables this work is funding. If UNICEF didn't have the funds, we would not be able to launch the cholera vaccination campaign. There is no UNICEF credit card. Pledges will not purchase vaccines, nor will they enable the training of community volunteers to provide the vaccines and the health education to women and families in need. UNICEF requires cash only to do its work, and that is why it is so imperative to us that all Kiwanis pledges are paid in full as quickly as possible. Things were not always this dire in Yemen. Before the current conflict and political crisis, the Yemen Ministry of Health, in partnership with UNICEF, was making true gains. In fact, by 2010, 3 million women had already been reached with the tetanus vaccine, with the country well on its way to achieving MNT elimination. But at the time, UNICEF did not have enough funding to continue the campaign before the conflict broke out. And without the funding, the immunization did not take place. Women and their babies remain at risk of tetanus. If UNICEF had the necessary resources at the time, Yemen would have been able to protect millions more women and their future babies before the onset of the conflict. My colleagues in Yemen and in other countries in conflict are constantly working to negotiate ceasefires and access to communities of vulnerable kids to provide life-saving assistance. But if we don't have the cash, the assistance can't be delivered in the limited windows of time we have to serve these kids. My friends, we do not have the luxury of time. We need to eliminate M&T, and we need to do it right now. The goal of eliminating M&T is an important one. It is an important one with particular significance for me because it's devastatingly the first time I ever saw a child die. Early in my career, on a visit to Sierra Leone, I was invited by the Minister of Health to see what tetanus truly looks like. You just saw the film, you heard the stories. I was brought to a hospital in a very remote area to visit an 18-year-old mom who gave birth to a baby who was literally lying on rags. This tiny 6-day-old infant was in unimaginable pain, convulsing every few moments. Many people don't know that tetanus heightens senses, so even the slightest bit of light, touch, or noise causes further distress. The young mom, she couldn't hold her child to comfort the baby. She didn't speak English. I didn't speak her language. All I could do was pull up a seat next to her, watch, and hold her hand. She had no idea who I was. I was just some crazy woman holding her hand. But as the minutes passed, as the two moms sat there, we sat in silence, and apart from the infant's ragged breathing, we could hear the baby gasping. And ultimately, during the time that we sat together, the difficult breathing stopped, and the child reached the end of her short life. I knew that baby was gone before her mom did. I didn't know what to do. I'm holding the mom's hand, and I knew that her life was going to change the minute she knew that news. I can tell you that the sound of that mom's wails will haunt me forever. The heartbreak is compounded by the fact that it was highly preventable. M&T is highly preventable. All it takes is 3 low-cost doses of a vaccine to protect moms who pass on that protection to their unborn children. The approach we are taking to address M&T is a clear example of what can be done to overcome the challenges children and families face. Deaths like the one I witnessed are preventable. They're preventable through low-cost solutions. Yet many countries lack the national capacity to design, carry out, and maintain health systems. Many countries lack trained healthcare workers, skilled birth attendants, adequate supply chains, well-equipped health facilities, and policies that reach the poorest and the most marginalized families. Our approach to eliminating M&T addresses all of these factors simultaneously. So once M&T is eliminated in a country, it remains eliminated. Since the time that Kiwanis began to provide funding, this critical funding, 25 countries have eliminated M&T. 25 countries. The most recent, as you heard, Kenya. Unbelievable. Now the nearly 50 million people living in Kenya can sleep soundly, knowing that their babies, their brothers, their sisters, nieces, nephews, grandchildren will not suffer from this horrific disease called tetanus. Globally, between 2010 and 2015, the neonatal tetanus mortality rate, the number of babies dying from tetanus, fell by more than 40%. You made that happen. Let me tell you, this is a remarkable leap forward in the context of global health. The Eliminate Project Global Partnership has provided UNICEF approximately $60 million in funding to implement programming around the world. $60 million. It is remarkable, and I just commend you from the bottom of my heart. Together, Kiwanis and UNICEF are raising the funds needed to keep tetanus immunization campaigns going and to ensure that these programs are sustainable. And I thank you for having taken on this challenge of eliminating M&T alongside of UNICEF. Already, Kiwanis has helped to immunize tens of millions of women around the world, and to help us put in place stable, routine health services and provide education on safe birthing practices. And I cannot talk about sustainability without talking about your efforts and your success in radically reducing iodine deficiency disorders around the world. During our first partnership to help eliminate iodine deficiency disorders, or IDD, in the 1990s, Kiwanis raised and leveraged more than $100 million for this global initiative. During the time in which Kiwanis was actively engaged, global household access to iodized salt increased from about 20% in 1995 to 70% in 2005. And Kiwanis hasn't left that fight against IDD. The Children's Fund is still graciously funding our global IDD elimination programs. It is long-term partnerships such as ours that they are our best chance to mobilize political and material resources to support children's needs and give them access to a healthy and safe future. In fact, sustainable and transformational impact only comes from our shared commitment to build stronger communities and heed a collective call for service and support to children. The Kiwanis Partnership is one of UNICEF's brightest stars. With UNICEF, I've worked in over 40 countries. And whenever kids see our blue shirts, they're kind of like the Pied Piper thing. They come running. They hang on our arms. They hang on our legs. I always say when you're a UNICEF worker, you learn that elephant walk of walking with kids hanging all over you. And they kind of stay with us until boredom sets in or something else catches their fancy. But there's always some kids who don't make complete contact. They kind of walk behind you. They're the little bit shyer kids. They kind of stay with you. They watch. But if you turn around quick, they turn around quick. It's interesting. And recently, while in the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan, when we began work at about 5 a.m. in the morning, there behind us was the little boy you see on the screen. one of my new heroes in life. 3 or 4 years old. He was with his 12-year-old sister. She was carrying their youngest sibling, a baby on her hip. 5 a.m., I pop out of my tent, there they are. They stayed with us all day. All day. And when we wrapped up our work around 5 p.m. that evening, we realized we had been so busy that we hadn't eaten all day, which meant that these 3 kids had also not eaten all day. They hadn't complained. They'd never asked us for food. Made us realize that they were very accustomed to not eating all day. Earlier in the day, we had been working in a breastfeeding tent where young moms are given nutritional biscuits in an effort to ensure that they're able to provide sustenance to their own children. And we too were given biscuits. And truthfully, because there's a group of us right now trying to avoid carbs, we had kind of quietly palmed our biscuits and stuck them in our backpacks. But now, realizing that these kids were hungry, we dug down and we gave the kid one of our biscuits. We expected him to run off, quickly gobble it down, this very treasured piece of food. And there were about 20 of us in our blue shirts watching. And we watched as he took that biscuit, and he kind of looked at it, and he opened it up, and without anyone saying a word to this child, this little 3 or 4-year-old boy, he opened up that biscuit, he broke it in half, he walked over to the baby, and he handed half to the baby. And all 20 of us wept. And I tell you this story because of this child, this little boy you're looking at, who had nothing, and I mean really nothing. It's winter. This child had no shoes on his feet. This child who had nothing shared what he was given. Imagine, just imagine what you could share. Our work is rooted in the belief that all children, irrespective of who they are, where they're from, all children have a right to a happy and a healthy childhood, free from discrimination, safe from harm, and everyone has a role to play, every single one of us, in protecting those rights. UNICEF and other UN organizations, governments, community and religious leaders, the private sector, healthcare providers, civil society. You can be the spark that others need to get involved. You can be the person who makes the difference to save generations. So I want to close with a challenge. I challenge you all. Dig deep in your backpack. Find whatever biscuit you possess. Share it with others. I promise you, you will not regret doing so. Thank you again, Kiwanis, very much.